Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Ovaltine Talks. This time we're doing things a bit differently. Beyond Light has just released, and given that we still don't have all of our seasonal activities for the gameplay loop out just yet, I'm only going to cover a few early impressions. At the time of this video, I've completed the main story and I'm currently working on the rest of the post-campaign, I guess you could call it. What I did want to spend the majority of this video talking about are a few pet peeves that have kind of been circling around in my head for the better part of year 3, as well as reflecting on Season 10 specifically. Why? Well, Season 10 was a low point for the D2 player experience. For me, it was the low point and damn near caused me to quit the game. This is because, as someone who started playing in Forsaken, the bar was set incredibly high. With that being said, I want to be clear that I don't want to harp on too much of the current or new stuff that they did, basically because a great deal of it has been done primarily from home, including the release and the launch. However, there's also a lot of new stuff that we just don't know yet or don't have access to. So this won't be too focused on Beyond Light stuff. We will have a video for early impressions and previous thoughts for Beyond Light in another video. But for now, let's jump right in. Coming off of Season 9, we felt like, yeah, okay, there's a lot to fix, but this was good. Loot was arguably the easiest it had ever been to acquire with the Empyrean Restoration event. Once you got to a certain amount of fractaline, all you had to do was pick the bounty for the weapon you wanted to get, and you just donated. There was a perk for ranking up the obelisk. Once you got him to a certain point, donating fractaline would progress the bounties. Go here, left click, get loot, farm god rolls, the end. That's pretty much the reason we called it Season of Stonks. I think the only things people had really harped on about Season 9 were the sundial becoming played out after a few rounds and after doing heroic a couple of times, the way Bastion had been handled with the corridors of time, and the oversaturation and overemphasis on bounties, both for leveling and seasonal content progression. So where does that leave us coming into Season 10? Well, kind of more of the same, but worse. There's a lot of things you can call Season 10 or Season of the Worthy. Season of the Shotgun, Season of the Bunker, of the Warmind. We ended up calling it Season of the Bounties and Season of the Beaver. The reason why I say it was the same but worse is because it was basically the same. EDZ, Io, and the Moon each had a Seraph bunker that you had to rank up by completing bounties and daily clears in exchange for the seasonal currency, which had perks for each bunker. This could be spawning a security defense frame, this could be automatically clearing a bunker, certain things that you could do in exchange for Warmind bits and encrypted Warmind bits. But each one had Seraph weapons and, all these other things that are associated with seasonal content. Honestly, I feel kind of bad for the team here because while we weren't necessarily saying, oh my god, delete bounties, we basically jumped to that mindset here because we got more of the same and it was as bare bones as possible. So everyone was burnt out. And honestly, the bunker bounties and the bunker gameplay loop was kind of boring. Couple this with the fact that Season 10 was one of the buggiest seasons ever, with people getting disconnected from the game and activities at an unprecedented rate, and you've already got a bunch of frustration on your hands. It didn't stop there, however. Seraph Towers, the seasonal public event, was also a major source of frustration for the community because the activity got progressively harder. But wait, weren't some people complaining about the game being too easy? Well, yes, but this wasn't good difficulty by design. While the first few weeks weren't bad, over time we'd graduate to the heroic version of Seraph Towers, meaning we would have more plates to clear in order to complete the event. But with more plates came more ads that constantly spawned, and this event required almost perfect play and a lot of coordination. No, this was no match-made activity, this was a public event. You needed to have people clear plates, kill ads, someone to chase the orbs that came from having a clear plate, charge the tower, and then kill champions at the end, all on a time limit. That sounds like a lot, and it really was. The problem with Seraph Towers wasn't just that it became hard to succeed with the heroic version, it was way too easy to fail. Even if one enemy was on that plate when Rasputin was getting ready to do his thing, you weren't getting all the orbs you needed to charge that tower, and the event being on a timer was pretty much GG go again if you failed one plate. The level of coordination required for a public event with no matchmaking turned a significant number of players off, and plenty of people decided not to bother. So what happens later on? Bungie announces a seasonal quest called The Lie for Fellwinter's Lie that required 9 million Seraph Tower completions. No, not public events, but Seraph Towers specifically. The day after the quest had launched, the grand total was at 5% for the EDZ, 1% for both Io and the Moon. Someone had actually crunched the numbers and found that with these rates, we'd finish the quest sometime in November, which is when this video is being made. The season ended in June, so there was no way it'd get done in time, especially not with people already tapping out of the event due to having bunkers either completely upgraded and getting their god roll weapons, armor, and mods already. Now, this is when the community was at this weird standoff between absolute uproar and near complete apathy. I'd argue that the apathy was even worse because when people stopped caring, they stopped playing. Not just the event, but the game overall. On the other side, Twitter was going nuts. Reddit was going nuts. People accused Bungie of designing this event intentionally for players to fail, and the furious also became apathetic. Sentiments like, fine, see if we care, let's just fail it. It's not like they're going to design loot that they won't deliver. And there was also speculation and theories that this was some kind of revenge for us completely smashing the Empyrean community quest from the previous season, with players in the community sharing strategies to maximize return on investment with Fractaline. Again, literally Season of Stonks. Bungie had very quickly responded and said they never intended for players to fail the event, but greatly overestimated the amount of completions that would be done, as only 100% completions would progress a quest. So they nerfed the quest by giving us a 5 times multiplier on quest progression that would boost up to a 10 times multiplier on progression during the weekends. They'd also made some difficulty adjustments to the amount of health that bosses and champions had during the tower event, as well as making it so that each wave would count for 10% instead of 9%, meaning we needed one less full wave in order to complete a phase. Almost nobody, except the super dedicated and arguably the content creators and streamers who literally made it their job to play Destiny, were willing to grind even more towers. The change certainly helped, but I think the issue with the event wasn't even the champions so much that it was getting to the champions. Ads constantly spawned, but Seraph Towers also showed how unstable the game had gotten when too many things were happening at once. In addition to enemies constantly spawning in, they'd also end up teleporting all over the place and pretty much always onto whatever plate you were in charge of clearing. Not just the fallen enemies who had, abilities like being able to go invisible for the marauders or the captains who would teleport around, but pretty much any enemy could do this because of issues with the network and the game itself. And since one enemy could sink an entire run, frustrations were at an all-time high. Now, remember when I said we'd called it Season of the Beaver? You were lucky if you could finish whatever activity you were in without getting error codes, and God forbid you were playing something like Gambit or competitive. Despite not it being your fault at all, you'd still be subject to leaver penalties in both playlists if you got booted due to an error. I'd had more beaver errors along with the other error codes in this one season than I'd had in the entirety of playing Destiny 2 on 2 different platforms. Plus, it was super likely that you'd load into an instance with like 3 people in it, if anyone was there at all. So getting a full 9 Guardian team to finish this thing was a pain in and of itself. So all of this goes down. We eventually get the towers done, everyone's on their way to getting the new shotgun, and then we find out the quest is bugged. Yep, that's right. On our way to getting Fellwinter's Lie, the next step, we go down and we fight the newest raid boss, a door that wouldn't open. You got nothing on it, you click the mission marker, you activate it, it gives you a black screen and sends you back to the entrance. Things were just kind of going bad to worse in Season 10, and eventually the quest got fixed. After a couple days, everyone had Fellwinter's, Crucible Shotgun City again. Now everybody's happy, right? Remember how I said people were tired of bounties? Well, we also had Guardian games, an Olympic-themed summer event where, you guessed it, more bounties. we had to do bounties and laurels in order to obtain medals that we turned in to see which class of Guardian reigned supreme. So this event actually got weighted differently just because of how many more hunters there were than any of the other classes, because, well, doing damage is cool. Hunters arguably had some of the coolest abilities and supers in the game, and much to nobody's surprise, Hunters dominated day one, taking gold, and then collectively said fuck it. Titans ended up winning the whole event and got their statue, if you want to call it that, next to Zavala. The main reason most of us cared about Guardian games was for the exotic weapon, Heir Apparent, which was a machine gun that was hipfire only, and readying the weapon spun it up. It was actually pretty cool and a solid option to do DPS if you didn't have things like Whisper or some of the other big exotics. You got it through completing the class Act Triumph, which was unlocked by completing 7 Guardian Games Triumphs. And those laurels we talked about, you needed to make them or pick them up for one of the Triumphs, and they all had different point values. Laurels created by your class were worth 3 points, and the other classes were worth 1. So say if you're a hunter, if you make a blue laurel for hunters, that's worth 3 points. If you pick up a laurel made by a titan or a warlock, that's worth 1. So how'd you get them? Well, you got them from ability kills, grenades, charged melee abilities, supers, etc., etc. But at this time, a lot of the super regen exotics had been nerfed, so we had to get creative. And by getting creative, I mean a lot of us just ended up grinding forges on hunters and doing altars of sorrow on the moon with Liar's Handshake and Arc Striders, literally just rolling around and punching shit for days to get laurels and finish up medals and bounties. With everyone getting burnt out on Seraph Towers, the most efficient thing to do was just grind old content for a new reward. Now, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, especially because we were, and still very much are at the time of this video, within a global health crisis. And they were working with not only a reduced workforce and personnel after splitting from Activision, but likely working from home. That's something that I always have to be cognizant of when discussing things about this time and discussing things like this in general. However, the end product is what matters here, and this one was relatively ass if I can be completely honest. The gameplay loop was boring, the gameplay itself was incredibly frustrating, and arguably the best thing to come out of it was the Warmind Cell mods that we had. And those were in PvE. The best thing for PvP possibly fell Winter's Lie. You can make the argument about Trials being the big thing, but despite all of their big talk about not wanting to bring Trials back half-baked, Trials was plagued with loot issues and cheaters that made people leave the move in droves. Despite receiving a mid-season adjustment, I think the damage had been done, and Trials did a lot for a portion of the PvP community, but not a lot for the overall community. I'm personally not a fan of threes, so Trials didn't appeal to me whatsoever. Whenever I did play competitive, it was for pinnacle or ritual weapons that also ended up being pretty damn monstrous in PvE. I think Season 10 was the low point for a lot of people, and a breaking point for some people, and I can't really say I blame them. It was as bare bones as you could get with recycled gameplay elements and activity grinds, but it necessarily didn't play well. Aside from having one of the more annoying sandboxes ever thanks to Hardlight, up until our current chilly situation. But more on that later. People were just not in the mood. In the midst of a pandemic where people were out of work, working from home, or working more if they were essential personnel, I don't think people wanted their downtime or their gaming time to feel like work. Season of the Worthy felt like work, and not only did it feel like work, it wasn't very rewarding for the majority of it. They did have that live event at the end of the season with Rasputin finally blowing up the Almighty and kind of tying up that whole storyline that the season was built around in the first place. I actually don't have too much negative to say about the event. It was pretty cool, all things considered, and it showed they have the technology to do things like this in the future. I actually would have just liked a little more heads up than a day's notice, and if it didn't take almost 2 hours to actually happen. They've gotten better with the end of the season live event stuff, most recently the Cataclysm event that we had before Beyond Light launched, but there's still some things to fix, mainly in regards to timeliness. There was a leaked email that had revealed the live event, And as such, Bungie went ahead and said, yeah, this is going out, this is a thing, be ready for it. We did have a little bit more than a day's heads up, but still, I think we should definitely know about things like this. I'm cool with surprise, but if you're gonna have a bunch of people log in at once, you need to be able to make sure the game can handle it. I think the timing was just odd because with Beyond Light coming the next day, servers were going to be going down and the whole game was going to be going down for maintenance. So there was a bunch of server issues and queuing issues for people that wanted to get in and experience the event. But this was right before Beyond Light. And with that being said, let's get to Beyond Light. I mentioned Heir Apparent specifically because it reared its head once again and was actually available through the Monuments to Lost Light kiosk in Beyond Light. It was a kiosk in the tower where you could acquire exotics and ritual pinnacle weapons whose quests and destinations were no longer available. Bungie actually removed the weapon from the kiosk and stated that players weren't actually supposed to be able to get the weapon in the first place, but rather they'd be able to acquire it from another event and should stay tuned for upcoming info on availability. Honestly, this sounds like they're bringing back Guardian games, and I really don't want them to. Despite us having new abilities and stuff to play with this time around if they do the whole Laurels thing again, at the time of this video, people are voicing their displeasure in the replies, so we'll see what happens. Personally, I'd prefer if they just kept that in and gave people as a freebie. Heir Apparent is a good exotic, it's fun to use, but it's not necessarily game breaking, nor is it meta as far as we know. Given the reception that Season 10 had, I think it'd be a show of good faith for Bungie to say, yo, go ahead, take this one, it's on us. That wasn't one of our finer moments. But considering how much they talk about aspirational content and had to be their moments, nothing's guaranteed. I would like to mention, if something does get changed, I'll be sure to update the video description with any info and necessary links. Now, despite the UI and UX receiving massive design overhauls as well as the game engine itself, the often obnoxious sub-ranked Achieve banner that shows up for Infamy and Valor, it's still big, it's still loud, and it's still in the middle of my screen. I know this is kind of petty, but we've been talking about this thing for the better part of 2 years now. With the changes that have been made to other milestones and how they show up and they're handled within the game, most notably those related to triumphs and character leveling and their respective positions on the screen, I don't think this is too far-fetched or unreasonable of a request to make. Speaking of leveling, that's another big one that's been a hot topic lately. I think leveling is certainly a big part of the game, especially with Destiny being a hybrid shooter / MMO. However, I don't think the way it's been done has been the best. Right before a new season, we tuned strategies to hoard bounties on multiple characters in order to absolutely blow through ranks on the season pass and get rewards, perks, and artifact unlocks as quickly as possible. However, I will give credit where credit is due because there have been some strong updates made to the leveling and progression systems in Beyond Light. I think the biggest change is powerful rewards no longer being locked to 1 per week and 1 per playlist. This does feel like it's more in the direction of that play your way philosophy, as you could potentially hang out in Crucible all day or grind strikes all day or Gambit, whatever your fancy is, and still receive the occasional powerful drop. This is a good change and it gives possibilities and options for people who don't want to grind multiple characters. I have a Warlock that basically just acts like a pack mule and a bounty farm. There's nothing wrong with Warlock, it's just not my cup of tea and not what I'm used to after playing Hunter for 2 years. I've had to hop on it for a few occasions, mainly to handle a grind or finish a bounty, get some extra experience, whatever. Or boss farming and, sending checkpoints across characters. But the grind itself has taken various forms, I'll say that. Now, I do think some grinds are fine, so long as the reward is worth it, and sometimes the grinds can be fun. The problem, at least to me, is that people confuse grinding for content. Grinding can be a part of content, but is not content itself. Leveling up your character by playing activities that have been in the game isn't new content, but new guns and armor are. I think the biggest issue that we had with Season 10 was And if we want to go back even further, Season of the Forge, for us to get new stuff, not necessarily new content, we had to go and grind old content in order to be able to do it, which at the time was just a little bit of new stuff, seeing it was the beginning of the season. If anyone was around for the launch of the Forges and knowing that people were drastically under-leveled when they released, we had to grind old content in order to get our power level up just to be able to do it. I also think how we grind is just as important. With this being the first week of Beyond Light, I'm already seeing that Bungie has made a couple of improvements to the overall quality of life as it pertains to the grind. Quests and pursuits are not only automatically updated upon completing a step and remain tracked, but you also see how many quest steps are involved. If anyone remembers First Watch, the Vanguard quest for the Undying title in Season 8, we basically just unlocked shaders and an emblem in a quest that had 12 different objective steps. But each time you finished one, it was just updated with a new objective, and it was very difficult to tell just how much of the quest you had left. To me, this wasn't good quest design, and the reward itself was pretty all things considered. I mean, you did progress towards a title, but not everybody goes for titles. Another thing I want to discuss is time gating content that's been on my mind. Mainly because it's intentionally and unintentionally held up progress with a couple of quests, both for community rewards and exotics. Now, what do I mean when I say time gating? I don't mean when it's the beginning of the season and people are still leveling their characters and we're waiting for something on the roadmap to be available. That's not what I mean by time gating. What I mean is when we need a specific thing for a quest, and for whatever reason, we can't get it done because the thing we need isn't available in the rotation. Nightfalls, lost sectors, or having to kill certain enemies in strikes. I'm looking at you, Hive and Fallen bosses specifically, and Scorn. Now, I know not everyone is going to be a hardcore player and look to complete an entire exotic quest or even a legendary or ritual quest in a day because it's supposed to be a quest. That much I get. We saw this happen with the introduction of legendary lost sectors in Season 10, where to get the Fourth Horseman and a couple of other things, we had to run a legendary lost sector, which at the time was not in the rotation and thus not available. And to an extent, right now, in week 1 of Beyond Light, we have Legend Lost Sectors again that you have to do solo for a chance at the new exotics. These also don't have other drop sources listed right now, but they're also on a rotation. Now, these are 1250, so really you shouldn't be attempting to do these solo until you're at least 1220, 1225, where it becomes more manageable, but people are also upset that these lost sectors take so much time to do. Personally, I think these only take so much time to do because we're under-leveled and you have to play slow and have a build for champions. But it's also the first week of the expansion. I don't think people would be as upset or be feeling so strongly about it if these had came out in, say, like week 2 after people had already done some leveling. I don't think the reception would be nearly as upset for some people, and I think it would be more positive overall, especially with the raid launching on November 21st, with a lot of people prepping and grinding for day 1. But I also think that just because something is available, they think that they have to get it now, which isn't always the case. But with Bungie's track record of handling FOMO, or fear of missing out, I don't blame anybody that feels like they have to go and get it right then and there. If we could blow through the entire season in like a month, I'm pretty sure people would. So they kind of drip free content to keep people coming back. I understand it. That's something that a lot of people probably would do. They would blow through all the content and just sit there until the next season comes out. But that's not what they want us to do. And honestly, I don't want that either. I don't want there to be a big dry period where I'm not doing anything. I want to be able to play this game at any time during the season and be able to find people still actively doing things and playing activities because they like playing them and get good stuff for them. We saw what happened with Seraph Towers when everyone got burnt out and refused to play them, even when we had a community event with a new quest, almost as a form of protest. Now, I know Bungie has a lot of data on who has what and when they get it, which is why they've removed and changed quests before, not just with Fellwinters, but with pinnacles like Redrix's Broadsword and Claymore and Mountaintop specifically, because some of the requirements were a little out there and very steep for your average player. The former actually saw Claymore removed and essentially cloned as the Broadsword, but with an easier, albeit longer quest line, because very few people actually had Claymore. While it was longer, it was also possible to do it a bit faster if you won more, but it also just showed how big of a gap there was between good players and our average players, particularly in terms of how long it would take an average player to actually acquire the Claymore. Back in those days, a player by the name of Cost Gaming actually did the math on how long it would take. Seriously, just go look at his video on Broadsword versus Claymore if you want to know. But this brings me to my next point, the Crucible in general. Now, I want to go on record and state that it is 100% still early, and as annoying and incredibly strong that Stasis is in PvP right now, I also know we haven't had the time to really sit down and figure out counterplay. So I'm not going to go too much into it. But I will say that it definitely needs to be looked at and reevaluated. Specifically the Shadebender class, or Shadebinder class for Warlocks. Seriously, it's the new hotness. This is why we're seeing it all over, because everybody's using the Stasis subclasses. But it's undoubtedly strong, and I think there needs to be some changes made, especially with the first weekend of trials being delayed until November 27th due to some bugs, including Shadebinder Warlocks being able to have infinite super, and Wither Horde is also been disabled due to some bugs. There's a couple of things that would definitely sour the experience. However, this isn't my only gripe with PvP. Now, before I come off like a salty streamer or content creator, whatever it is that someone may call me, let me go ahead and be completely transparent about this. I am a slightly above average PvP player, by my own estimation and possibly by stats, but you wouldn't know that from looking at recent gameplay, especially not whatever's in the background of this video. My main issue with PvP is the matchmaking. Matchmaking needs to be overhauled. I'm not just talking about skill-based versus connection-based. We already had that argument this summer, and both sides made some very good points. I'm talking about the actual match quality. The way your in-game skill is weighted is odd, to say the least, or at least it feels odd, because I honestly can't get a handle on how it works. Actual match quality has been volatile as hell. I could get shit on for 3 straight games, and then the next one seems more my speed, like I can actually move around and get kills. But if I do particularly well in that game, you know, say if I get maybe 15, 20 defeats, I'm going back to fighting stacks the very next game, and not just regular stacks. These are people who have titles like Flawless, who have titles like Unbroken. These are high-level PvP players. Prior to making this video, I actually decided to do some research thanks to the Destiny API being available to developers, and they can make utilities for the game. This is how we've got stuff like Dim, Destiny Item Manager, Ishtar Commander, Greytech, Charlemagne, etc., etc. I know Destiny Tracker may not be the most reliable thing in terms of representing the population, especially in terms of skill levels, but it's going to serve the purpose for what we have right now. So in Season 11, I was listed as being in Diamond 1 for Control, which was like the top 2%, but that was also within the 80,000s on the leaderboard, so I'm not an immaculate standout player by any means. So far, this season, in Beyond Light, Season 12, I'm in Platinum 3. Now, I'll be honest, I am a quick play monster. I'm going to say that right now, because it's the aspect of PvP I enjoy most, and thus, it's the aspect and the playlist I play most. I like Destiny's PvP as a 6v6 experience, even though most of the maps are way too small for it. The problem is that the other 6 players are likely stacked up. Now, I don't have an issue with people playing in groups, playing with their clans, playing with their friends. That's how it should be. Destiny is a team shooter. It's much more fun to play with friends, and it's much better to play with friends, in my opinion. I just don't want to have to fight a 4 or 6 stack as a solo player. Now, you could feel, well, it's quick play, so it doesn't matter. And while you do have a point, here's the issue. Solo players shouldn't be queuing into six stacks, and the overall gameplay experience isn't much better, and the match quality certainly isn't much better. I just don't think it's good. No, I have also beaten and even mercied against stacks as a solo player, but I've also had teammates who were dial in and played the objective well. This isn't the average experience whenever I'm in the playlist. It's usually the other way around. I've actually reviewed my match history since this season started, and after playing 28 games of PvP in Season 12, we're sitting at 10 and 18. Of those matches, over half of them were played against teams that had at least 3 members in a fire team, many of them being part of the same clan. And as far as the actual matches, 8 of them lasted 5 minutes and 30 seconds or less, but the timing isn't exactly indicative of the result. I'm not sure if Bungie has confirmed this, but Dumpling's definitely changed. There's been an update in Season 12, and I'm noticing that Shaxx will call a mercy no matter how much time is left if a team managed to get over half of the opponent's score at any point. While I guess this is good for match completions, it's pretty demoralizing for a lot of people. Whether they're in the playlist to finish bounties or a quest, whatever. I will give them props though, because I appreciate us having an indicator of join in progress protection being active, because it's definitely not fun joining games in progress, especially if you backfill into a loss. I get that the PvP community is the minority, but it's still a substantial part of the overall player community, and we all deserve to have a good experience, not just those of us in trials or competitive. And I hear those aren't the greatest experiences to begin with, even with the adjustments. I don't play comp if there's no gear that I want, and I don't play trials, period. I already don't like playing threes, and there's nothing that playlist has to offer me. Sorry to sound like a downer or, complaining about shows that I don't watch, yada yada, but it just doesn't do anything for me. And despite the adjustments that they've made to the loot system and dealing with cheaters, I still don't have any desire to go into that playlist. But damn, quick play deserves some love too. A lot of people play it. I appreciate that we can get powerfuls if we want to hang in Crucible all damn day, but we should also get better matches while we're in quick play as well. This is gonna sound like an armchair dev moment, but I'm sure this can be looked at and it can be adjusted, and it certainly needs to be. They've already addressed skill-based matchmaking and how it benefits some players but not all, especially in terms of queue times and overall match quality. Now, I don't want every game to be a stomp or a mercy, but I also don't want every game to be overly sweaty and just feel like 6-player competitive. There's probably never going to be a chill PvP experience, and I'm honestly fine with that. If there's going to be PvP, the objective is going to be to win. That's okay. People are going to play meta. People are going to use what the best weapons are. I don't have an issue with that. I just want a good PvP experience. PvP is always going to be your mileage may vary for a lot of people, especially in games like Destiny where the main draw is arguably the PvE. Coming off of Season 11, I felt like PvP wasn't in too terrible of a place. Stat games didn't happen as often, at least for me, and while the auto rifle meta was annoying, auto rifles hadn't been meta for quite some time. But we also had other options. We had 150 RPM hand cannons. We had high impact pulse rifles, which had recently gotten buff. We had snipers. We had shotguns. We even had sidearms in a really good spot. So there were things that you could use to fight inside of Season 11, and prior to Season 10, we really didn't see an auto rifle meta before any point, really, unless you want to talk about Uriel's gift meta, which I admittedly was not around for. But this kind of brings all this together and the reason why I made this video. Coming off of Season 11, where once again loot was easy to get, and we got umbrals for literally just playing the game. Damn near any activity, these things drop like candy. I find that we're back to that place of, okay, this is good, but there's still a lot to fix, just like we were in Season 9 going into Season 10. Now, bugs and all that other stuff I can forgive because, again, 1, game dev is hard, and 2, we're still in a pandemic, so people are working from home and most likely not at the studio. I wanted to talk about this now because I couldn't find the energy to talk about it when Season 10 was actually going on. There was already so much negativity, so much anger, but also apathy towards the game that I felt like I didn't want to contribute to it, but I also didn't want to look at the game, let alone play it. I did my bunkers, I did my mods, I got Fell Winters, I got Heir Apparent, and that was really it. I'd have days between logins. I didn't stream as much aside from, in addition to streaming the game, and the constant errors just kept me uninterested and uninvested. I'd honestly said fuck it and started playing everything else. Halo the Master Chief Collection was on Steam, Yakuza 0, Final Fantasy VII Remake had released a month after um, Season of the Worthy came out. So you name it. It was a really weird time personally since I'd just been laid off from a job and then found another one later on. But that in between point between, that one job and then starting the other was also the timing of Season of the Worthy. And it was really difficult for me to kind of stay motivated and stay into it. I'd been burnt out on Destiny and I decided to start streaming more and do all these other things, not necessarily for additional income, but just to try and keep myself busy. I've also noticed a pattern here. Bungie delivers some of their best work when their backs against the wall. See Forsaken after Gear 1 and Season of Arrivals after the practical shit show that Season of the Worthy was. And now I'm expecting that it's going to happen again with Season 13 being great because I already see that people are pissed off at the value of Beyond Light in Season 12, even though it's in its first week. Obviously, there's a lot of feelings regarding sunsetting compared to the number of new weapons that we've already received or will be receiving. People will have some very valid points regarding the expansion, but I'll make a separate video for my thoughts on the expansion coming soon, after we get more of this content and has some gameplay under our belt. I'm hoping that this season proves these feelings wrong and Season 12 actually turns out to be a great season. And I hope we have 4 great seasons throughout year 4. Each bringing something new and exciting to both the game and to the community. I want people to be excited. I want people to enjoy the game. I know this is going on, but I don't like making rants. I don't like focusing on the negative. I don't like putting out content that has this energy. Honestly, I don't know if any of the people who make the decisions at Bungie even see this or if they're even going to care since it's coming from little old me. I don't have pull in this community. But I feel like this sentiment is shared across the community. Those of us who are still here are here because we still like Destiny and still love Destiny. We don't want Destiny to be hard to love and we don't want it to be hard to care about. If you have made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you all so much for the support. We'll have more stuff coming soon and we will see you in the next one. Peace out and stay safe.